principle number 1 says that English learners bring many strengths to the classroom. So we are going to look at a video of a principal talking about the English learners in his classroom. So I love how that principal described the English learners as children of promise, and really thinking about the assets and the gifts that that the English learners bring to your school community. So, so number 1, we'll be thinking about that as we guide our instruction. All right, number 2 says ELs learn best when they are taught in a welcoming and supportive school climate. Front office staff, classroom teachers, the principal, the way that the principal talks about the English learners in their building really do set the tone. And we want to make sure that we are welcoming families in a way that just sets that family up and that student up for success. I chose a couple pictures here, again, some more pumpkin pictures, but one part of welcoming students is helping them to understand some of the customs and the things that we do here in the United States, right? So, so the pumpkin, the other pictures are pictures of Valentine's. I've had students who, you know, in their home country, they did not pass out Valentine's cards, right? But we don't want the English learners to feel left out in any way. So I always have Valentine's to give out with our newcomers. We usually do that together as a class. So just thinking about the ways that that we can include and inform our families and our students, helping them feel more comfortable in school. I was thinking that I know middle and high school students, they probably don't pass out Valentines, but I know at our high school, they still do spirit days for homecoming week and explaining, you know, why are you going to dress up in a toga, right? So helping our students feel included in that is an important part of helping our English learners. All right. Guiding principle number 3 says that ELs should be taught language and content simultaneously, right? And this makes sense for efficiency, right? You're killing 2 birds with 1 stone. We're going to teach language and content at the same time. And while that does maximize instructional time, it also is really an effective way to grow language and grow content. You can read and write and speak about anything, right? As you're learning language. So why not pick standards from the content that the students will need in their regular classrooms? All right. And number 4 says that ELs benefit when their teachers collaborate to share their expertise. So we're thinking about how EL teachers and content teachers must work together to share their knowledge and enhance the academic success of English learners. So while maybe the EL teacher, they're an expert on how you acquire language, how second language develops, but the content teachers, they have the skills and the knowledge that the students need to be successful in geometry or in 4th grade science. They know the standard. So we really have to put those 2 pieces together to help enhance instruction for English learners. Guiding principle number 5 says that ELs excel when their teachers leverage advocacy and leadership skills. And I'm going to go ahead and read this quote. It says, because many inequities and injustices still exist for ELs, it is up to educators like you to speak on behalf of those ELs and their families who have not yet developed a strong voice of their own due to their acquisition of English and or knowledge of the U.S. education system. So this, I think, kind of also ties back to that welcoming piece, right? If our families don't understand the education system in America, we have to help them, right? Either because they're not their own language skills, or when your school, your district is making decisions that affect English learners, it's up to us to be an advocate for them. All right, so this next slide has them all on there again, those 5 guiding principles. And what I'm going to ask you to do when we go to our first breakout session, hopefully this one maybe like, I don't know, 5 or 8 minutes, I'd like for you to look back over those guiding principles and share which principle you feel with which you feel the most confident and comfortable in your current practice and setting, classroom or school, and then share which guiding principle you feel maybe the least confident and comfortable with. Then if there's time, you can share out any other ahas or statements that stood out from chapter 1. The explanations for each of those principles are on pages 14 to 21, I believe. All right, and I think Cayman is going to get those breakouts started.
Yes, I'm getting those started. Give me just a second. I'm going to push people out in just a moment.
While we're waiting, if there's any questions that you want to put in the chat or anything that you
Allison, we don't have any questions in the chat yet.
Okay, thanks.
Okay, if there are no questions, I'm going to go ahead and create those chat rooms. So I'm going to push you all out. I will set the timer for 6 minutes.
Sounds great.
Okay, see you all in about 6 minutes.
All right, thank you so much for that. Thank you for organizing those, Cayman. We're going to move into chapter 2 now, and we're going to think about defining culture and the characteristics of culture, and then move into how we can organize our instruction to be culturally responsive. And you are going to need your book. So if you don't have it out, if you want to go ahead and get your book and open up, we're going to page 30 is where we are going to we're going to look in just a second. So this next slide shows just some things to think about as we begin our discussion of culture. Number one, and again, these are just to think about on your own. How do you define culture? Why is an understanding of culture important for your work with English learners? And then what strategies do you use to find out about the cultures of the ELs you work with and incorporate their cultures into your instruction? So our text defines culture as a system of shared beliefs, values, customs, behaviors, and artifacts that the members of society use to interact with their world and with one another. On page 30 and 31, the text outlines just some other ways to kind of understand culture. First, they talked about how complex and dynamic culture is, and that it is always changing due to political changes, pop culture, as well as generational changes in values and behavior. So it's never going to stay still. It's always evolving, always kind of growing and changing. They also talked about how we are each members of different cultural groups, and how our connection to specific cultural groups can change. Kind of like when we were young, we may be closely align ourselves with the culture of our parents, but as we're exposed to new ideas and experiences, that cultural identity can change and kind of grow. And then one of the last things they talked about was how there is great variability within cultural groups. So even within the same family, the same country, the same cultural group, there can be many variations. They talked about how challenging this especially is for second generation English learners. Maybe their parents were the first ones to come to the United States and they were born, the parents weren't born here, but the English learners, the kids were the first ones that were born in the US, and how they are really sometimes pulled between the culture of their family, the culture of their home country, and then the new culture that they're learning at school. I know I have many parents who complain about how once their students have been in school for a month or two, they're wanting to take on English and not speak their home language. So we really try to encourage our families and our students to keep up with that home language while they're learning English, because, well, obviously it's a superpower, right? To be able to speak two languages, and we want them to continue with that. They also pointed out that because there is such variability, that it's really important that we don't overgeneralize and say that all, all people from this country do this, or all some in this group do this, and that we don't ask children or students to speak on behalf of their culture or their country. All right, and then next we're gonna look at this graphic. I believe this is at the bottom of page 31. They talk about 3 different levels of culture and kind of how those come into play as we understand, again, those customs, beliefs, traditions that encompass culture. So the first type they talk about was surface culture. And if you look at the top of that iceberg, it's the white part. It's what's visible. It's what you can see. It's the clothes that you wear, the language that you speak, the music, things that you can see and that you like, right? They are more concrete elements, and they usually carry a low emotional load. The next type in that graph, it's figure 2.1, shallow culture items are items that are used for everyday communication and behavior. And this might include beliefs about time, concepts of personal space, nonverbal communication patterns, and their relationship to authority. This type or this level of culture often does carry an emotional charge and might lead to misunderstandings. An example of this, my brother-in-law is actually from Egypt, and with his upbringing, with what he believes, when you invite someone over for dinner, you have to have a lot of food. Like, it is horribly rude to run out of food or to be seen that you don't have enough. Right? So after 20 years of this, my sister just knows that when they have company over, they're going to have leftovers for a week. Right? So that's kind of like a way that they that they behave, and that's a nice thing. So we just want to be aware of those different levels. And then the last level, the deep culture, are ideas about cooperation, collaboration, and notions of justice. So often these really do have a very large emotional load, and can even lead to culture shock if we are put in many different situations. All right, and we're going to think about how each of these levels come into play in the classroom in just a minute. So we will look at that. All right, if you go ahead and turn your page to page 32, there's an application activity that's called My Multicultural Self. And we're not going to take time to do the whole thing, but I did think it might be good to just kind of think and reflect on this for just a few minutes. So it asked you to, number 1, to make a list of the cultural groups that you belong to. So if you kind of think about those, if you want to write them down real fast, you can. Think about how, what, how do you identify? And then if you want to put a star next to a couple of those. Number 2 says to describe a time that you felt proud to be a member of one of those cultural groups. And then kind of the contrast to that is, when did you find it a challenge to be a member of one of those cultural groups? So kind of like the benefits and burdens, right? That kind of yin and yang between those. And I think that one of our jobs as educators of English learners is to kind of help our students navigate those feelings, and just being aware that in different situations, they might, be really happy and proud of their cultural identity, but then there might be other times when it is a challenge. So if you would like to, we're going to move on for time, but if you want to come back to this and spend some more time thinking about that, I think it would be good. So we're going to move into thinking about why culture matters when you are teaching and learning, and what happens in the classroom when you just what impact culture might have on English learners. And then that second bullet says what might be preventing English learners in your classroom from being more active participants in your class discussions, and what might you do to support those students. So we are going to look now, skip over a couple pages, and we're going to look at page 36 and 37. It's figure 2.3, and it's called Reflecting on My Cultural Beliefs and Expectations. So the text has really taken some aspects of school and looking at how that might have an effect, or just some cultural considerations and how that might have an effect on students and what you're noticing about their behavior in the classroom. So what I'm going to ask you to do for about 5 minutes is to really mark up that text. We're going to put a check mark next to things that maybe you already knew about or that you've heard before. You're going to put a question mark next to things that you felt were confusing. Then put an exclamation point next to things that surprise you. And then put a plus mark next to things that are new learning. So we're gonna, I'm gonna give you about 5 minutes to mark that up a little bit, and then we'll share a couple of those in the chat.
Allison, you have a question in the chat about page numbers.
Sure. The page number for this activity is 36 and 37. It's figure 2.3. Let me go right here.
Emily, you also, if you got the new edition that just came out a week or two, we're using the old edition. So that may be the issue as well.
All right, kind of as you're finishing up, just for time, if there was one that you thought was really surprising or something that was new, if you want to maybe put a word or two in the chat, we could look at those. I was going to share an experience about school culture and just the way things are very different in other countries. In our school, maybe about 4 years ago, I had a newcomer student who was from Russia, and I had met the family. I felt like we were, had a good relationship. We were really on the same page. We met at open house, and all things seemed to be going well. About 3 weeks into the school year, we have in our district, we do a PSP meeting where we meet with the classroom teacher and the parent, and we go over their plan. So we invited Dad to come in. He said that he would. And when he got there, I could just tell like something was wrong. He seemed very nervous, very uncomfortable. And the whole time I was thinking, oh, what have I done to offend him? I just couldn't wait to get through what I needed to say to, get to his questions. And so at the end, when we told her how well his daughter is doing and we made her plan, and at the end, he was like, "Is that it?" We're like, "Yeah, she's doing well. All things are great." And he said, "Well, in Russia, you don't get called to school unless there is a problem, unless your daughter or your child has done something bad." And so he was genuinely scared of us three sweet teachers just trying to tell him what a good job his daughter was doing. And so I just think we take a lot of that for granted sometimes. All right. Was there anything else that anyone thought? I always kind of think that plagiarism one is kind of interesting too. I don't know if anyone else agreed with that. The whole idea that you own somebody's thoughts varies from culture to culture. I thought that was pretty interesting. Yeah. Anything else that anybody wanted to? All right. So now what we're going to do, we are going to start looking at the part of the chapter where we really get into the characteristics of what a culturally responsive school climate, what that might look like. Chapter 2 has 4 guidelines for culturally responsive instruction. Number 1, that they use an asset-based perspective, that they place students in the center of learning, They value students' linguistic and cultural backgrounds and simultaneously challenge and support students. So we are going to be in our next breakout room. We're going to try to get this done in maybe just like 10 minutes, Cayman, if we can. So here's your job. We are going to, I'd like for you to pick one of the 4 guidelines in your group. If you look at page 41, there's a graphic that has the 4 that we just did. And then I'd like for you to briefly look over that section that pertains to that guideline, and then just lift out one line that really resonated with you, and maybe share that line in reasoning with your group. If you have a question about what to do, you can put that in the chat, and hopefully that will start.
I'm going to push people out now. Is that good?
That's great. Thank you.
Okay. And you said you'd like 10 minutes?
Yeah, let's do 8 minutes.
Okay. Great.
Okay, we are getting very close to the end. I want to address, I know there's some confusion with the books. We started preparation for this book study before the second edition was on the radar. Actually, its publication date is officially January of 2024. So we did not anticipate people having the second edition. And in fact, copies of the first edition were sent out to districts ahead of the book study, and that's what we thought folks would be working from. If you had to get your own book, we appreciate that you got one, and we understand why you would want the newest one. So before our second session, we will do our best to develop some kind of crosswalk that will help ensure whether you're working from edition 1 or edition 2, that this is all making good sense to you. With only about 5 minutes left, I'm going to turn it back over to Allison to wrap things up. I will be dropping a Google form into the chat. Please make sure you click on the link and keep it open so that you can fill it out so that we know you attended and so that you can give us your feedback. Thanks very much. Allison, go ahead.
All right. Thank you so much for sharing. I hope that next time we are going to have a little bit longer time together, and we'll have more chance to share. I'm going to skip this. The first edition of the book has an important little box that you can look for if you're going back to think about each guideline. So I put those up there. But again, these are the old editions. Briefly, Guideline 3 highlights the importance of finding and using multicultural books and materials. I'm going to save this video. We might play it next time because I love the way Dr. Bishop explains why it's really important to use multicultural resources and books with children. And in her analogy, mirrors, windows, and sliding glass doors. So we're going to save that for next time because I want you to have time to fill out your survey. And these are just a couple multicultural texts that I've used in the past. I will point out that this one, teach us your name. I think that was in chapter 2 also somewhere how important it is that we really learn our students' names and learn how to say them correctly. And then this book, I think middle schoolers would still read this book. I mean, it's appropriate for all elementary, but this book is called Everybody Cooks Rice, and it's beautiful. We might talk a little bit about that next time. If you look on page 38, I know I think we're just running out of time. These are just some suggestions on how to learn about your English learners. I would recommend doing home visits, talking with them informally. Those were found on page 39. This is an activity that to really learn about a student's culture. It's called a culture wheel. If you click on that link, you'll get a copy of the slides also. It explains that. And just a way for students to create kind of a visual product to show some things that are really important in their family. And then it can also be a great writing and speaking activity to do with all of your students, not just the English learners. And we're going to come back to that one next time. I want to make sure that you have time to fill out that feedback and give a few guidelines for the next session. So these were our objectives for today. I would say that we did not quite get to do the last one, but hopefully those first 3, you could say we at least briefly were able to discuss those. Thank you so much for your time. I really, I know that your plates are full, and I really appreciate the important work that you do with your students, and just that you're caring enough to want to improve your instruction for English learners. So I think Alec is going to put a feedback survey form in the chat that you can fill out. There's a spot for questions also, so hopefully we can address those in future sessions. Our next session is going to be Thursday, December 14th. I hope that you will have a chance to maybe try something from chapter 2. I put on here either using a diverse book, something from the Getting to Know You, could just like a survey of some sort. If hopefully we're going to have time at the beginning of next session to share a little bit about that, and then read chapter 3. I was also hoping that you could pick one class or subject that you want to focus on for the remaining sessions. So it can be kind of overwhelming to think about changing a lot of what you're doing in your current practice. So if you're at the elementary level, maybe you just pick, okay, I want to think about how I might tweak some lessons in math. How can I make my math content more accessible for my English learners? And so if you already have something like that in mind when we start working with the content of the next few subjects, the next few chapters, I want you to have some time to really think about how you might apply that to that subject area. Of course, middle and high school, whatever your specialty is in that area. And I guess I will.
Sorry, folks, we're having a little trouble with the chat and getting the link in. So I've shared that in another way with Cayman and Brandy, and they're going to try to drop it in the chat now. So hold on just a moment longer. I know it's 5:30, but just give us one more minute to try to get that to you. And if we are not able to do that, we will just email it to all of you separately. And if you can give us your feedback, we would greatly appreciate it.